Saints fans and who-dats from all over the world. It's time for the Bayou Blitz. With your host, Bob Rose.
Good evening, New Orleans Saints fans, fans of the NFL, and fans of the Bayou Blitz. We are so powerful that we moved Wednesday to Tuesday. So we are happy that you are joining us on this special night and special time broadcast. I am Bob Rose. I am one of the co-hosts of the Bayou Blitz. And joining me is my partner in crime and someone that we hope might be able to provide a pass target for Drew Brees in the next couple of weeks. Mr. Kyle Mosley. How are you tonight, Kyle?
It's all about the separation, my baby. You got to be able to separate. you got to play physical this time of the year. And look, guys, well, how you doing, Who Dat Nation? This is Kyle T. Man, I tell you what, I loved what I saw from a standpoint of those guys grinding and kept on finding a way to win. And I love what I saw from our defense. But I got some nagging little things that we got to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. The defense and both networks, both your Saints News Network and us over at Canal Street Chronicles, we've been talking about the New Orleans Saints defense being a lot stronger unit that the national media is not really talking about, and they put forth another very impressive performance yesterday. But I got to be honest, I'm with you. I'm a little bit more concerned about this offense week by week, particularly the passing offense. And even more specifically, it feels like we talk about it literally every week on this show. Who, other than Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, and Mark Ingram, who on this offense is going to step up because nobody is doing it? And the Saints struggled once again through the air last night. The final numbers might not show it. I mean, Brees finished with 203 yards. The Saints finished with almost 350 total yards. But a lot of that was skewed because of their ability to run the ball. They ran the ball for 155 yards. But it just didn't feel like they were making any plays through the air. And we've seen that. I mean, this was their third straight road game. So we know the Saints passing offense is not nearly as prolific on the road as it is at home. So that, of course, has something to do with it, as does the physicality of the Carolina Panthers defense. But Kyle, I mean, this team's got to make plays through the air, through the passing game. And they're starting to scare me a little bit.
Well, here's the positive, Bob. They may never have to go back out on the road a game. Okay? Mm-hmm. That's the positive, number one. And, we could have 4 straight home games in our Mercedes-Benz Dome, and our second home in ATL, we could have our final game there. So those things are positives as far as the Saints are concerned. But if you look at Michael Thomas and the other person that was pretty good for the Saints in the receiving area, of course, Alvin Kamara. But Kirkwood is being able to show a little bit more promise for the Saints. The concern is how Dan Arnold as well as Traquan Smith are not really securing the balls and not attacking the balls at its high point or coming toward the pass to grab the ball out the air. And I think that has a lot to do with the inexperience those two guys have. That's why when they signed Dez Bryant, it would have given them the opportunity to see somebody who is aggressive at catching the balls. Even though Dez may not have had the same type of speed and separation of years before, but what you're going to get out of Dez Bryant. But also, Michael Thomas was fighting. He was fighting for every little catch that he could get. These guys got to have a little bit more physicality in how they approach the game.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I do like the way Keith Kirkwood is playing, quite a bit. And he did have a solid game last night. I'll agree with you. But yeah, Traquan Smith seems to be a feast or famine. And yeah, he struggled in the last couple of weeks. getting separation, coming back to the ball, fighting for the ball. And on a couple different plays last night, you saw Drew Brees kind of get in the ear of the young receiver. I mean, he didn't publicly undress him or anything like that, but you could tell that Brees was unhappy about something, and a couple of the patterns that we saw during the Carolina game, you could certainly understand why. And I do think that this young man still has quite a bit of potential. It'll be interesting to see what he contributes to the team through this stretch run and into the playoffs, because they're going to need somebody else to step up.
Well, look, guys, and we have to remember that Kirkwood, Tre'Quan Smith, Dan Arnold are still rookies. And Josh Hill, man, he did a good job on the screen, but he's still missing in action. I was surprised Ben Watson didn't secure the ball a little bit better on that second catch of his. I just believe right now, man, having those type of games on the road, those hard-fought games, those games where you had some learning experiences that we needed to overcome, I think this is going to bode well for these guys going into the stretch of the final 2 games of the season, as well as into the playoffs. Now, you talked about Drew Brees getting on those guys. You should have seen Sean Payton get into Tre'Quan Smith as well. And Drew Brees was on, and he was doing some coaching to Dan Arnold on the sidelines as well. But that's why we needed another veteran wide receiver to be a part of this group. Hopefully, Ted Ginn can be able to make it back to help us out. And also, if you also notice, we did not have anyone stretching that field. And for the past several weeks, it was really, I think Drew threw the ball at least, I think he has thrown the ball down at least 20 or more, probably 5 or 6 times in 3 games. That's not a lot, man. So we've got to do a better job. And, Bob, all in all, what can these young guys learn? What can this team learn? And how can they be able to bond together? I'm not worried about the offense as much as I'm worried about how these young guys are going to respond. Not react, but respond to this type of minor adversity, but some learning situations that can help them down the stretch.
Yeah, because they're going to be challenged. The book is out on this receiving core, and we've seen teams really clamp down on them, clog those intermediate and shorter routes, forcing the Saints receivers to work through a lot of junk, a lot of coverage junk, which obviously, even for a seasoned receiver, it takes time for that, or even more time for that route to develop. And the New Orleans offensive line, although they did play better last night, in the previous few games, they have struggled a little bit more than what we've seen them during the course of the season in pass protection. Now, we're waiting to you mentioned Ted Ginn Jr., and he will be a big addition if he's able to get back onto the field. But we're waiting any week now to Ron Armstead to be back at left tackle. Yeah. Bushrod is struggling a little bit more week by week. And as a matter of fact, down the stretch of the game last night, they actually pulled Bushrod. And at one point on the left side of their line, from center out to left tackle, Cameron Tom had replaced a concussed Max Under, and they moved Andrus Peat out to left tackle and brought Will Clapp in at left guard. So that tells you that, they don't feel entirely comfortable with the pass protection results that they've been getting. So we really need to see Armstead back on that field and as close to 100% healthy as he can be.
Right. Before we bring our guest on, Bob, I just have to say this one thing about the offensive line. We knew what we were going to get with Bushrod, right? We knew he was just to be able to serve a certain amount of games to help out when Teron Armstead would get healthy, come back to the fold. So what he has been able to accomplish, and the players that he's gone against, like Lawrence and a couple of those speed rushers, I think he's done an admirable job for who he is at this point of his career. So Pete concerned me because he was reaching too much.
Yeah.
So that's a concern. We've got to get Armstead back as soon as possible. Will Clapp played a pretty decent game at guard. I was surprised to see what happened there, but I'm concerned what's going on with Warford right now as well. So we have our guest on with us at this time. Who's in the fold with Bob and I?
Rudy Reyes.
Hey, Rudy, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Good, good. This is Kyle T. I'm here with Bob Rose.
Rudy, it's a pleasure for you to join us.
Thanks a lot. It's a pleasure being on. I appreciate you guys.
For a lot of our followers that know me, they know that I grew up in Western Pennsylvania and even now currently reside around the Pittsburgh area. So I've always gotten an eye full of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And one of our two very exciting guests tonight, Mr. Rudy Reyes, who used to cover the Steelers, is still a huge fan with a good pulse on what the team is doing, and currently an anchor out in Cheyenne, Wyoming, for KGWN-TV. Is that right, Rudy?
Yes.
So tell us, what are your feelings about it? The Steelers overcame a big roadblock, and that's probably an understatement, last week when they finally beat their nemesis, the New England Patriots. And they were coming off of 3 straight losses in doing so. What do you think that did for the confidence of the Pittsburgh Steelers going into what is also a very big game for them this Sunday?
Well, I want to start off with thank you for having me on. I appreciate that. As far as the Steelers are concerned, looking at that 3-game losing skid, go to Oakland, lose. That was a huge AFC matchup. They could not have afforded to lose. The problem is that predominantly Steelers do not leave Oakland Coliseum with a win. They haven't won since 1990. So it makes you wonder what's up with the field. You've seen plenty of players slip. Ryan Switzer, hopefully get him on the show real soon here, the RootDogShow.com, which is my show, and talk a little Steelers football. But ultimately, what I did like about the Steelers is that, as they do every year, they're the heart attack kids. But the heart attack kids are younger than I am, so they're kids to me. But what really makes them interesting is that they play down to their competition. I don't know if it's because they're on the road. I mean, they lost to the Chargers at home, so that kind of throws that whole theory out of the window. But I like what, Mike Tomlin, as being a head coach, most people aren't a fan of. 3-game losing skid, all lands on the coach's shoulders. That's just how it is in the NFL. But I like the fact that Mike Tomlin was able to answer the call, get it done against a team that predominantly he doesn't have a winning history against. And Tom Brady, I think, is 7-2. We're now 7-3. Rather over the Steelers at home or even in Foxborough. As far as the hump that they needed to get over, it was a collective effort. Defense played much better, limit those chunk plays, except for that one nasty play on the right-hand side with blown coverage. Of course, it was Artie Burns. At least that's what my suspicion was. He was supposed to be over there covering the basic no-name tight end for 6 to open up things, and ultimately Patriots ended up making that field goal. So Steelers get over a big hump. It was a staple win. Joe Hayden with that game-saving interception as the Patriots were preaching and creeping down that part of the end zone and would have gone up at least be able to tie the game to take it into overtime. Steelers are playing good right now on both sides of the ball in all 3 phases, a little bit slippery on the special teams. I like where Ben's head is at right now, but that could change with any given game. And, of course, with a near dead last Saints secondary last year, they're still pretty darn good. They're a lot better than they were last year from a lot of perspectives. But again, very suspect, just like the Steelers secondary suspect. I think both of these teams mirror one another. I think they mirror each other not only with the Super Bowl winning quarterback in Drew Brees, who's a first ballot Hall of Famer, in my opinion, against another first ballot Hall of Famer, Ben Roethlisberger, having won 2 Super Bowls. But I like the matchup. I like the matchup on both sides of the ball. You have to keep the record in the perspective, though. Why? Because the Steelers can outplay and outshine. I mean, they did that to Carolina at home, shafting the Panthers, who the Saints played yesterday. A very low-scoring game, by the way. I had a chance to watch that one. I was just thinking something's wrong with Drew Brees and the offensive scheme that they were putting together. Kamara didn't get a whole lot. Nobody really got a whole lot, to be honest with you. The stingy Carolina defense really showed up against a familiar foe. But I like the fact that the Steelers are able to get the ball to guys like Juju Smith-Schuster. Eli Rogers had 3 receptions. There are just a lot of different things going on right now for the Steelers. As far as from a talent standpoint, that's going to match up well, especially when you look at how well that Saints up-front defense is concerned. I see a sack coming, and it's probably from Demario Amaro, who's been everywhere. I mean, literally on that line as well as in the NFL. So I like the Steelers in this matchup. I don't know that it favors them because they're playing at Mercedes-Benz in the Big Easy. It may not be a Big Easy for the Steelers, that's for sure. This is going to be a great game nonetheless.
Sorry, I lost the connection for a second. Rudy, that was some great analysis. Do you see in the last few weeks, the Steelers secondary, much like the Saints secondary earlier in the season, like you said, the Steelers secondary was, shall we call it, much maligned, and they still struggle against opposing tight ends. Do you think that they have a single coverage person, or how are they going to guard someone like Michael Thomas, who's pretty much established himself as a superstar?
They're going to have to do a lot of double coverage. You see it against Gronkowski for the New England Patriots. They doubled him. He I think it only had 2 receptions in the game. We're going to have to limit those type of chunk plays. Michael Thomas is a superstar, and if you give him too much cushion off the line, he will make you pay, whether he's in the slot or whether he's on the outside. So the Steelers defensively are going to have to mix up Sutton. You're going to have to mix some blitzes up with fired blitzes, putting Mike Hilton on the outside to try to get past a very stout and relatively decent Saints offensive line in order to put pressure on Brees, forcing him to make errant throws that we had seen yesterday. So those types of plays are going to have to be limited. You're going to have to cover the downfield guys. Joe Hayden came up big. You're going to have to do it again. Stay consistent. Don't give too much cushion from the guys that you're trying to cover, because predominantly you don't know if he's still the guy in the slant, if he's going to do the comeback around now. And I've seen the secondary burnt many, many times in regards to those short field passes. So ultimately, you're going to have to apply the pressure up front, cover your guys supposed to, between Michael Thomas, keep Alvin Kamara in check, because he can kill you in open field. There's no question about that. And if he's not going to the Pro Bowl, which of course the NFL is rolling out the Pro Bowl selections right now, I think if Kamara doesn't make it to the Super Bowl for some reason, Saints fans, he could go to the Pro Bowl.
Yeah, he did not make it. He did not make it to the Pro Bowl. He was not voted a starter.
Wow.
Yeah, and only 5 of the Saints were
I don't know how that works.
Yeah, it was Drew Brees, of course, Unger, Armstead, Michael Thomas, and Cam Jordan were the only Saints to be Pro Bowl starters for their NFC squad. But the Steelers have 6 representatives, so that's pretty good for you guys.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, it is. You're absolutely right. These guys play extremely hard. Some of the penalties on DeCastro, though, are just questionable for me. And I don't mean as far as he's concerned. I'm saying as far as from a technical standpoint is concerned, and why the refs call offensive holding, and just really weird. And I'll be honest with you, officiating this year has not been the fan of mine. I'll be honest with you. And regardless of whatever game, a lot of inconsistencies league-wide, and I think that things could be tightened up a lot more, and to be a lot more scrutinous in some situations, especially with man zone coverages, being able to call those penalties accordingly, because it's out of control at this point.
Yeah, my opinion, the officiating is poor. Let's just call it like that, Rudy. It's just poor. Very questionable calls, and calls at the wrong time of the game when the officiating is starting to decide games, we have a problem. Look, in my opinion, when I look at the Steelers, and I've seen the Steelers play probably around 7 times this year, the offensive line has to be applauded for what they're doing. Tell me, how important do you believe the offensive line is for that team?
Well, offensive line is solid across the board for any NFL franchise. You have to have the stable protection. I mean, it was seen for the most part for Tom Brady being, 40 years old, still playing behind a relatively decent offensive line. But I think that the hits are really, let's just say with 2 games left on the schedule and the Patriots will go to the playoffs, I think the Patriots are an easy out. And it's not necessarily because of quarterback play, even though you could probably hand that off to Joe Hayden and ask him, it's just a recipient of a really bad throw. And he was. It was a very poor throw. One of those things you just don't see characteristically. But the offensive line, for the most part, in any given NFL game on any given Sunday is extremely important, is extremely relevant. And unless these guys are going to perform solid hand checks and pancakes and making sure that, hands are basically in other words, you have to be an octopus. But with that comes great footwork. Offensive linemen have it probably as difficult as a defensive lineman, to be honest with you. But it's very important. It affects quarterback play. It affects the running play. It affects passing. It affects everything. So in this game specifically, with the stout Saints defense, the Steelers' offensive line is going to have to be on point. Villanueva's been getting it done. The Castle's been getting it done. And, of course, you still have a loss for, another unnamed offensive lineman for the Steelers in Gilbert. And I say that because he's been relatively not effective this year at all because of the amount of games that he's missed. But Fiedler steps up. There's just a lot of cohesion. So it's a very important aspect in any given game, on any given NFL Sunday, to play our absolute best. And it's more important to do it on the road. And I think you could probably say it's equally as important to do it at home as well.
Gentlemen, I mean, you're talking about the offensive line, and that's a perfect segue into our next outstanding guest. A terrific offensive lineman for the Pittsburgh Steelers through the 80s and into the early 90s. Member of their all-century team and currently one of the team's color analysts, Mr. Craig Wolfley. Welcome to the show, Craig.
Well, hello. Thank you, fellas. Nice to be here.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Craig,
by the way, I got to jump. I'm doing good, but I got to jump in because when you're talking offensive line, you're talking about the most important position to play, okay? That's where all the fat guys are at. The fat is up front, okay? And these boys, the boys you got in Pittsburgh, this is a well-fed bunch because there's a lot of money being put into that offensive line, and the line has performed well. But truly, you guys are right on. Rudy's right on, man. You're talking about one of the best. If you're talking about the conversation of the best NFL lines, Pittsburgh's got to be in the top 3. I would imagine, and certainly I'd say this about the officiating, just because I got to listen. And one of the things I know was happening when DeCastro got called for holding, it was either Lawrence Guy or Malcolm Brown. I can't remember which of the guys he was pass protecting, but they were throwing the uppercut. And when they're throwing the uppercut, they're lifting high, and then they're grabbing the arm. Because what you want to do on a twist, you want to be able to hold the guy on the inside and have the twist guy who's running behind. You want him to be able to have a clear path. And that's what was happening. And I told some of the guys, I go, back in the old days, they did the same thing. It's like a one-arm wrestling drag. The way you finish it, though, we used to, was you take that free left hand of yours, if you're Dave DeCastro, and you punch him right in the liver so he drops like he's been, boxer, a body shot. And people looked at me and go, well, that's the way it used to be, okay? They don't do it now.
Don't. Craig, I look at this Steelers wide receiving core. They get Eli Rogers back. He's going to be very important to the Steelers slant throwing game. Are they going to insert him more into the game plan against the Saints?
You know what was interesting was they got him involved immediately from the very first series. Now, you think about this. Eli's been out since he popped whatever it was last year, and he's been out all through training camp, preseason, OTAs, everything, all the whole season long. And then last week, watching practice, I mean, Ben was going to him, and he was lighting up the place. He was catching everything thrown at him. Well, sure enough, you know, he comes in the game, immediately they go to him. Here's the one thing I like about Eli Rogers. When you talk to him, he sees the middle of the field like Ben sees the middle of the field. He reads the safeties. He's very adept at playing peekaboo with the big tight ends. So if you put him in a bunch, he's going to get lost somewhere in the middle windows in a zone coverage. You know, he gets behind the 6'7" Jesse James or the 6'5" Vance McDonald, and he does a little rub route. You know, back in the day, we used to call those picks, but you can't because then it would be illegal. So they run little rub routes, and you find yourself over the middle, and he sees the field like Ben sees the field, and that's why they've got such a good hookup rate.
Craig, one of the things, and I listen to you and Tunch a lot, big fans of both of you.
That's your first
mistake, bud. But I mean, you guys have always had such a great pulse, you know, for the team, what's going on, what they need to do, et cetera. But one of the favorite things that I like about you, both of you too, is that you're both football historians, and I know Rudy, Kyle, and myself are as well. I hate to bring up a bad memory as I clear my throat and think 1987 Three River Stadium against the Saints. But tell us about what it was like. I mean, you were a standout offensive lineman for a power running Chuck Noll Steeler team. How tough were those New Orleans Saints defenses in those days?
Well, throw me some names so you can refresh my memory, like Ricky Jackson and the Sam Mills and who else in that linebacking core? You guys had like 4 Pro Bowlers.
Yeah, Mills, Jackson, Vaughn Johnson, Pat Swilling, Wilkes on the defensive line. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All I remember, the incredible athletes. I mean, that front seven came at you hard. And Sam Mills was the heart and soul of that defense. Ricky Jackson, being a Pitt guy, you know, coming and play whenever he played the Steelers, it was like homecoming for him. He loved to play against the Steelers. Pat Swilling was a fierce competitor, and I remember having there was a couple good defensive ends. Who else was there? Come on, give me the names. The front defensive linemen.
Eric Martin. I'll say Eric Martin. Reuben Hayes, Walter Abercrombie, Dwayne Woodruff.
I mean for the Saints. The Saints defensive line.
Wayne Martin, Jim Wilkes, Kyle. I'm drawing a blank. Help me out.
Oh man, there was Jumpy Gathers. Yeah, and Gathers. Oh man, he was a storm.
Yeah,
he was a stormtrooper, just waiting to happen, man. He was. Let me tell you, man. There was one of them too. I can't remember. We didn't get along, and we kind of duked it out a couple of times just because we just didn't like each other. I don't know why that would be. I'm such a nice, friendly guy. I don't understand. So anyhow, we had a little Ducamundo, and the fact is, when you get rolling around with those guys, they were just rough, tough hombres who, they really brought the bang. Loved it. It was always an exciting, fun game. So, you know, every time we got to play them and play them in the Superdome, man, it was just so huge. You know, me coming from Syracuse and, the decrepit Archbold Stadium, and then you come in and see the Superdome. That was really something to see. So that was, I was a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed guy, even as a veteran, going down to the Superdome, having to play there. But I will say this. I was really disappointed. I went down there the first time I went to New Orleans. Tunch and I jumped the cab, went to this restaurant, supposedly the best crawdad dish. And I got to tell you something. It was horrible. They had these whiskers sticking out. They didn't even pull the heads off or something. It was bushy. I couldn't believe it, man. I was just like, I was so disappointed. I waited so long to have some real food down in New Orleans, and I got the wrong crawdad.
I think we call them crawfish.
Was there anything else on the menu you wanted?
Oh, yeah. I filled out with something else. I didn't leave that. Are you kidding me? But it was the crawdads. I was just so excited. for whatever reason, it wasn't right. It didn't taste right. And he had these eyes bulging out looking at me. I didn't like that. I don't like my food looking at me. You know what I mean?
You don't recall the restaurant you went to, right?
I can't remember. It's down around Canal Street, somewhere along there.
Okay.
But I can't remember. Now, every other time I've been back, as long as I stayed away from the crawdad, I've been fine. Everything is wonderful down there. The food is superfluous. But just that one time, the crawdad just was not happening.
All right. Well, look, we'll make a notation not to give you any crawdads, but we can give you some crawfish.
There you go. There you go. I got the wrong craw thing.
Without the whiskers. Without the whiskers.
the wrong craw.
Oh my goodness.
Craig, this victory that the Pittsburgh Steelers notched over the Patriots this past Sunday, what's that do for the team's psyche?
Oh, man, you want to talk about a lifting of spirits and the doom and gloom. Look, there's no telling. I mean, everybody's got to know. You lose once, yeah, it's a Debbie Downer Monday. You lose twice, it's starting to hurt. You lose 3 times in a row, and, man, things get really kind of rough. And back in the day, those were the times when Chuck Noll, if you heard Chuck say it's back to basics, you knew it was going to be one hellacious week coming. It was going to be a lot of one-on-ones, a lot of fisticuffs, a lot of extra running. Chuck would be screaming at us all week. I mean, that's the nature of how it was done back in the 80s and 90s. Now it's not like that, but still, you have that feeling that, man, we've got to get our groove back. And facing the Patriots, who've beaten you 5 straight times, not once, not 3, not 4, but 5 straight times, not beating them since 2011. Tom Brady all-time was 11-2, now 11-3. You're looking at all these factors coming off of 3 straight defeats, and you're thinking, great googly moogly, what chance do you have? But that's what I love about this team. They do so well when they're backed up against the wall. When you got remember that Robert Conrad battery on the shoulder thing, I dare you to knock it off. That's what these guys do best. When their back is absolutely against the wall, they come out swinging. For whatever reason, they go 6 wins in a row, and then, all of a sudden they get tripped up and they lose 1 or 2, and then you lose 3, and then it becomes like this personal challenge where you are backed up against the wall. So they come out swinging, they come out fight, and they come out with a great game. A game where they could finally close out in the fourth quarter. Huh, fellas? I mean, Rudy, I know you saw that game. I mean, finally, you close out defensively in the fourth quarter.
I did see that, Craig, and there was a lot of things that I enjoyed about watching that Steeler defense. They clamped down, they applied pressure. There were no sacks on Tom Brady. I was telling the gentleman earlier, and sure they were probably watching as well, but there were no sacks on Tom Brady. But enough pressure to force him into an uncharacteristic throw, landing it right in the hands of Joe Hayden. And that defense and offense, everybody fed off of that because, again, an uncharacteristic throw enabled these guys to control the clock and ultimately control their own fate as they head into the playoffs.
The beauty of it is, I believe they got to him once. I think T.J. Watt got a sack. I believe it's his 11th of the year. But they banged him 7 other times. And there's a study out there that I really believe in. And this study was done by a university and all this stuff, where you take a quarterback, an NFL quarterback, you hit them hard 5 or more times. That means 5 or more, whether it's sacks or knock him to the ground with a good punishing hit. And great quarterbacks, after 5 or so hits, they become good quarterbacks. Good quarterbacks become average quarterbacks. Yeah. Average quarterbacks, after 5 or more hits, become below average in their accuracy. So what we saw as the game wore on and went into the fourth quarter, we saw Tom throwing off his rear foot, including the one when he was trying to throw out of bounds, and Joe Hayden went Michael Jordan, because he's a Jordan athlete with Jordan shoes. He got about 4.5, 5 feet off the ground, it looked like. And he out-jumped Gronk and made a great interception. And, I mean, that was pandemonium. And, Joe said after the game, I got me a Brady ball, because anybody that gets an interception off Tom Brady, that's a Brady ball. That's getting marked. That's going on the fireplace mantle,
Yeah.
So, defensively speaking, they closed out. They did a great job on Gronk, who's killed them, over the years. He's averaging 110 yards over the last 6 games against Pittsburgh. And here Last year he had 9 for 168, and now he comes away with just 2 for 21 this year. I got to tell you, defensively speaking, I really believe that the constant pressure, and the fact is, you might say 40 is the new 30. 41 is still 41, fellas. And when you're 41 and you're out there with some highly, charged up, guys with their ears back, pass rushing, mutant, Dobermans, that's a rough thing to handle when you're 41, I got to believe.
Yeah, definitely.
Well,
hey,
I'm 46, and I feel it when my 1-year-old takes a run at me, so I can only imagine what Tom and Drew and even Ben are feeling like on a Monday after a rough Sunday outing.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. Look, hey, I'm 60, man. I got texted on my 60th birthday. Somebody said, remember, 60 is the new 50. I texted back. I said, no, 60 pretty much feels like 60.
Hey, Craig, I have a memory for you. I had Rod Woodson on the show. I know you know Rod really well. And one of our conversations was that he forgives the quarterback from throwing that interception in the end zone Super Bowl 30. What are your thoughts on that? How do you weigh in? Do you forgive any particular player for maybe making a bonehead move?
Oh, you know what? It's always it's gone. You can't ever live in the past like that. Now there's a few players maybe that there's a few guys that you kind of ruffle each other's feathers, and if you see each other, I'm not sure I would shake the hand of a couple guys that I know. But hey, Randy White and I fought every time we played. Now, I don't know why. It's like kerosene and a match between us. It, just seemed to be. But he was a great player, and he was a very physical, tough, and no nonsense guy. And I saw him a while back. It was funny because we kind of looked at each other across the way, and before you know, we're walking by each other. We looked at each other, stopped, and then finally, out comes the smiles, out comes the handshake, and then the bear hug. It's you let bygones be bygones. It's past. It's hilarious because I remember even as a broadcaster watching Ted Washington when he played for the Cleveland Browns or whatever. He was like 400 pounds. He was a nose tackle, massive guy. Well, his dad played for the Houston Oilers, and I remember getting in a battle with his dad in Houston down in the Astrodome. So when he ran by me, I was like, geez, I hope his dad wasn't telling him stories when he was a kid about me. He might give me a shot running by.
Hey, guys, it's been great. It's been great. I got to run, though. Craig, fantastic. Thanks for talking, man.
Hey, thank you for being on.
Pleasure.
Thank you for being on with us.
Yeah, Rudy, thank you so much.
Merry Christmas to you all.
Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas, brother.
Yeah, Merry Christmas to you. We're going to have you back on again soon, but we thank you so much for taking a couple minutes with us tonight, Rudy.
Anytime,
He's a sharp guy.
All
Take
right.
care, Rudy.
Thank you so much. You too.
Craig, tell me something. Is James Conner going to play this week? What have you heard about that? And then, to piggyback that, were you a little bit surprised at what Jalen Samuels was able to accomplish on the ground last week?
First of all, I'm not sure about James Conner. I do a show with him Monday nights, and he's walking without a limp. But I've had the high ankle sprain myself. My teammate Tunchuk and that we do a show with. Back in the day, he got beat across the face by Skip McClendon of the Bengals. So he goes and he throws Skip on the back of my legs, which I get the high ankle / broken bone in my ankle, which I still blame him to this day for that. So, yeah, I'm still blaming my buddy Chaluch, okay? He busted my ankle because he got beat across the face by Skip McClendon, okay? So it took me forever to come back from that thing. It's a hard thing because even though you might walk without a limp, there's no power in the ligaments. And when you try to plow, because the ligaments hold the tissues and everything together, right? That's how you apply power, through the ligaments and tendons from the muscles. And the thing about it is if they're not able to bear that sort of power that you need to derive from the push-off, there's nothing you can do. And even though I remember when I busted up the ankle while we were playing the game, and I got shot in like 3 places. My ankle was crunching, like you're walking on broken glass,
Ooh.
And I just remember at some point I had to pull myself out because I just couldn't get to where I needed to be, because it's not that I could really feel a whole lot of pain or anything. It's just that you got no power in the ankle. So he's got to wait to get that ability to generate power. Now, the second part of that, Jalen Samuels. Jalen, I've been watching him since training camp. We had back in I think it was in early September, they invite the vets to come along and have dinner with the rookies. And I had an interesting conversation with Jalen. I came away going, this is a really bright, young, intelligent guy. I mean, somebody who's, he seemed to be mature beyond his years. And the way he talked about, he went about preparing, doing prehab, rehab, taking care of his body during the week, and post-game, his ability to do post-game stuff to get the body ready, with the ice baths and all that stuff. It was very mature, and just listening to him and then watching him develop over the season, you can see where he's got some real ability. But, no matter how much I try to tell you, I'm not surprised. You got to be surprised by a guy that comes out and gets the ball 19 times. He never carried the ball more than 12 in college. He gets 19 carries, runs for $140 something. Just really, really good. Now, the one thing he's got to do, he missed some things on the pass protection. One of the things that James Conner does so very well, he picks up blitzers, and that was part of the problem that we saw with the Patriots when you saw a couple of guys run free, a little free runners. That Jalen's got to be able to handle that. But other than that, it was a great outing by Jalen Samuels.
For sure. And I don't know how much of a chance you guys have had to break down the New Orleans films so far. But
that
from
starts tomorrow, brother.
Okay.
I saw Keith Butler today or yesterday, and I said to Butler, I said, you already after the Saints? He said, yeah. He said, you got a guy playing better than this guy this past weekend. I said, well, try to roll around in this past weekend for a couple of minutes, huh? Enjoy that because, man, oh, man, Drew Brees has just been unbelievable.
How do you see Drew Brees and with the attack from the defense from the Steelers? Do you think he's going to be able to handle it, or you think you're going to have a similar type of success that you guys had against Tom Brady?
Well, I got to take a look at that offensive line and get a gander at him. The offensive line of the Patriots was better than they had been the year before. I thought Joe Thuney was a guy that you could get after a little bit 2 years ago or a year ago, and Joe Thuney is better. Trent Brown is a much bigger man. I mean, that guy, he's a biscuit and a breakfast under 400 pounds. But, when with the Saints, you got to take a look. They all look good last night just watching. But to get on the coach's film and be able to see the end zone and the all-22 and then see all the breakdowns and the cut-ups, that's what you got to do. You got to get after a little bit and see a little more in-depth and unpack that thing. But one thing that stands out is the tremendous offensive weaponry available to the Saints, because to see that game from that view behind the face mask of Drew Brees has got to be unbelievable. He is a coach, and he is like a quarterback guru all in one. Watching him, operate out there. Tunch tells a great story. He was down in New Orleans, and he was talking to Sean Payton, and I guess Drew, this is some years ago, was out it was not even OTAs. He was out on the practice field. He was like mimicking a game, just going through motions, and you're just playing air ball by yourself like a kid that was thinking about playing in the NFL someday. And Sean Payton saw him and said to him, he goes, "Who won?" And I think what a magnificent example that you have a guy like Brees out there all by himself at the highest of his game level, the guy that is a walking quarterback whisperer to himself, and he's out there just mimicking the fundamental techniques of playing quarterback in a game. I mean, that to me, that speaks of having aspirations to be of the highest quality that you can be.
Tell us, one of the things that have made the Saints offense so successful over the years, it has been the relationship between Sean Payton and Drew Brees. tell us, and I've heard some mumblings. I don't believe them myself, and I don't see it. But tell us a little bit about the relationship between Coach Tomlin and Ben Roethlisberger. Is there any kind of strain there, or do they have a solid foundation?
By all appearances, it's solid. Solid in every way. I've not heard really a whisper of any sort of discontent. I think that at times Ben, had some difficulties with Todd Haley, but, those things happen. Again, I come from a different era, and I almost got in a fight with my offensive line coach. I mean, at one point I didn't like the guy, he didn't like me, but we got along enough that, we operated. You do that. You don't have to love somebody to play next to or with or under somebody. You know what I mean? This is a game, and it's grown men, and you put aside those petty things, and you come together, and you get the job done regardless, So I do come from a different era. I would tell you honestly, if some of these guys were coached the way I was coached back in the 80s and 90s, they'd start crying. It was a little bit different. It wasn't quite the kinder, gentler NFL as it is maybe today. But the point is, get the job done, and you've got some great minds. I don't care what anybody says about Mike Tomlin. You kidding me? You're in your 12th year, and you still haven't had a losing season yet? Show me any city franchise out there that wouldn't love to sit back and go, we've had the stability of 3 coaches since 1967 or something like that.
Yeah, wow.
3 head coaches since 69. I can't remember. The point being is you had that stability of franchise, and you make sure the relationships are you can operate from a face-to-face, always being able to talk. And I don't think there's any question about that with Ben and with Coach Tomlin.
And I agree with you. I think Tomlin's a terrific coach too. I think I've heard some things around Pittsburgh that I wish some of the fans would feel differently about Mike. I don't think he gets the credit, nearly the credit that he deserves for the success that he's had. But I mean, the team, and you've been in the middle of it, so the team has undergone a little bit of a transformation. From veteran back to rebuilding through youth since he's been there, even since the last Super Bowl that they've gone to. How are those young players, people like Edmonds and some of those guys up front on the defensive line, how are they progressing? Are they going to be a real factor for this playoff push?
Well, I think so. I mean, you take a relatively young guy like Javon Hargrave. Javon's got, I think his high point now is 6.5 sacks. I mean, he is really playing so very well, and he plays in both now in base Okie, the 3-4, and he plays sub-package, spelling Cam Hayward and Stephon Tuitt on the inside. He's shown pass rushing skills that they didn't know until one of those guys got hurt, and suddenly he's out there doing some saccurations. So he's doing well. Terrell Edmonds is doing well, had some good plays, against Gronk and with some of the other wide receivers. And, Terrell, he got beat a couple times in Oakland. This is part of learning. But he's coming along. He's doing well. You got James Washington, who basically led the Steelers, 3 receptions for 65 yards this past weekend. Mm-hmm. He got sat down 2 weeks ago, didn't get a helmet, and comes back and because Justin Hunter got hurt, he gets a helmet, and suddenly, boom, Ben took him aside, worked with him, talked to him, threw the ball at him a million times. And James Washington showed that, everybody's screaming about, Ben is, he's throwing him under the bus. He challenged him in a very positive way. He didn't demean James Washington. Remember when he dove for the ball and should have run through it and everything? Mm-hmm. There's all this hubbub that Ben. Listen, you're a 15-year veteran. You're the quarterback. You got rights to speak to people. Right, I mean, you've earned that right.
Right.
I remember as a young buck being told off by Terry Bradshaw to zip it. I hadn't earned the right yet. Okay, I get it. I learned my lesson. It's okay for the team leaders to come through and speak the truth, and he did. And James Washington, he responded. Everybody's worried about James. How's he going to handle that? He handles it fine. His dad was a rancher. His dad's out in Oklahoma. He's got a farm. He works from dawn to dusk. He's punching doggies and roping cattle and everything. I mean, you think a young man who grows up around that's going to be, tough words going to be like that, say, hey, you got to run through the catch? Come on. To me, it gets ridiculous sometimes about this. Make sure you don't hurt anybody's feelings. Speak the truth. You can speak the truth in a way that is both challenging and rigorous, but not demeaning. And that's the way I thought Ben handled it. I thought it was perfectly fine. Hey, you should have been in the locker room when Joe Green was throwing helmets, man. That was duck and cover.
Well, I mean, between some of the tough guys you had on your team, I mean, Green, Jack Lambert, Mike Webster, I mean, even Terry and Franco Harris. I mean, not only the Hall of Fame pedigree to back it up, but just such intense competitors over the years. If I was a rookie, I'd be afraid to move.
I was. The funny part is, I remember do you remember when Ndamukong Suh kicked that Packer guard a few years back?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm sitting there watching the news, and this comes on, and they're screaming about the horror of Ndamukong Suh and, how horrible that is. And so I started laughing. My wife looks at me and she says, "Why are you laughing?" I go, "Oh, they're getting all bunched up about, Ndamukong Suh kicking a Packer guy." I go, "That was just another Wednesday practice at Three Rivers with Joe." That's just the way things happened back then. So I don't know. I'm an old dinosaur. What can I say?
Well, and you're talking to a couple, if I may, Kyle. You're talking to a couple old dinosaurs too. I feel very much like a get off of my lawn kind of guy, and I never thought I'd be that guy. But I get what you're saying about football, and even, I mean, you were coached by one of the toughest guys around in Chuck Noll, and I remember those Steeler training camps, the infamous Oklahoma drills and things like that.
Oh yeah.
Watching Sam Nover do the old training camp highlights, and if there weren't 2 or 3 guys getting their helmets ripped off and thrown onto the ground, then it wasn't a practice.
It's funny that you speak of Sam Nover too, because I just attended a funeral, a memorial for him that they did in Pittsburgh. He was buried. Of course, Sam was a great broadcaster back in the day, and he was interred down in Florida, but his ex-wife and daughters had a memorial service for him today. And so I attended that today, and that brought back a lot of memories, and there are a lot of tears and a lot of smiles remembering Sam. But certainly he would bring you the best of training camp, and training camp was different back in my day. It was funny because you come up now and you've got nice dorms and air conditioning and prescription mattresses, and we had no air conditioning. We had horsehair stuffed mattresses. There were no cell phones, of course. Back then, you had one payphone in the hallway, and the one lone TV on the floor had bunny ears, and you had 3 stations. So that you were really captive of Chuck Noll and football when we went to training camp. That was life.
Give us, and I know you got to get running here in a few minutes. I love talking football with you. I know you've been down to New Orleans a couple times, both as an analyst and a player. Compare the environment to coming down to New Orleans as opposed to teams that had to come into Three Rivers back in the day, and now Heinz Field. Just the kind of fan atmosphere. Rabid, is it tough? How tough is it to play?
Well, you're talking about playing in the Superdome? Superdome.
Both places, yeah.
Okay. It's louder in the Superdome. I mean, there's nothing you can say because Pittsburgh, it's open air. So you've got open air stadium, and they did close the one end off, which has made it a little bit louder. And the Steeler fans, they are very much in your face with the terrible towel and everything else. Mm-hmm. So it's an impressive sight when you see 65,000 terrible towels start swinging in the night, and the Renegade is playing on the Jumbotron. And it's funny because a lot of people, you'll see a lot of visiting teams when Renegade comes on, not a one of the offensive unit or defensive unit will look at the Jumbotron while it's playing. They'll keep their backs to it. They don't watch it. It's rather funny. Very much so in the Superdome. You come down there, you got some rabid fans, and they are very loud. And, of course, given the fact that it's a covered stadium, the noise level really, really gets up there. And it's impressive. It's just very impressive going there. And I've always had a deep appreciation for the Saints fans because they are equally passionate, and they will make themselves heard. That's for sure.
As a player, and now as an analyst, did you ever have any problems with the Who Dat Nation or any of the fans?
I wouldn't say not any problems. I know that there was a fan at one stadium that I happened to see, because being on the sidelines, go up and down the sidelines, the fans in the front row, sometimes they can, they get a little bit wound up. And I saw a fan taking, I would say, some liberties with an elder Steelers fan. So I talked to the head security guy of, it was just kind of like he was just doing things like, he was just being a jerk. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Wasn't anything over. So I said to the Steelers head security guy, I saw him, I go, I'm getting really agitated here. So if I go over and I jerk this one fan out of stands and I pop him one, what's going to happen? He goes, well, the first thing is you're going to get arrested, then you're going to miss the plane. Mr. Rooney's going to fire you. He says, so that's pretty much what you – okay, I'll leave him alone. I got it. There was a whole litany of things that, was about to happen, and none of them were good. So, that's the way it is, But by and large, the fans are great. They're passionate. They're rabid. They're showing their support for their team. And, as long as they keep it between the white lines, so to speak, it's all good. It's great. Now, I'll tell you, back in the day when we used to play in the Astrodome, that was a little bit rough, because down there, this was back when, smoking was allowed, and you had a lot of those redneck fans down in Houston, with their filterless cigarettes, and before you knew it, by halftime, there was a cloud hanging over the field.
Yeah. I recall those times. But also, I remember the times in the Superdome where we would have like the little haze after halftime as well. So, man, golly.
I don't remember it being so bad in the Superdome. I do remember in the Astrodome.
Look, one game my dad and I went to, I got sick because the guy in front of me, he and his wife smoked the entire time, and that smell just got in my nose, and I caught a cold.
Yeah.
I was out for a whole week after that. But it got pretty bad in the Superdome, I tell you this. But look, man, here's my concern. Steelers are playing well. They have they're in a position where they have to be able to win this game, right? What are some of the keys to the Steelers win that you could be able to share with our fans?
I would say this, and just right off the top of my head, number one is you've got to reestablish the running game that you just found. Okay, you cannot go back into the swamp of throwing the ball 60 times and not running the ball effectively. This is part and parcel. I know that it's a new game. I know that there's so much new advantages for the offense, and I know that Ben is a Hall of Fame quarterback, and you've got two of the most elite receivers in the NFL there, but you got to run the ball. You got to keep some semblance of a 50. Now, you're not going to be 50-50 because the Steelers are way too dominant with the throwing, but you got to be closer to 50-50 so that the defense still has to go through their run reads. You can't simply surrender the threat of the running game and simply say, just cover us. I mean, it's no good. The second thing that it does, when you throw the ball 55, 60 times in a game, throughout the game, what you're doing is you're creating a counter-punching attitude for your offensive line. What they're doing is they're constantly sitting back and counter-punching. What you want to do is have an offensive line that is equally capable of rolling over their front foot, balling up their fist, bowling the neck, and blowing a guy back, moving him against his will from point A to B. You still have to have that aggressive attitude. And if you don't have that ability to manufacture that hostility of mind enough to move a man against his will from A to B, you're going to be shortchanging yourself. So you've got to keep that balance and keep that offensive line still able to get off on the snap and move somebody. So number one is you got to run the ball. Okay, number one, so that you keep your defense off balance, opposing you, and you keep Drew Brees on the bench. The more you possess the ball, the less he has got time to put points on the board. So you want to possess the ball, you want to run the ball, and then you want to also make sure that you're getting wins on first down. It's so difficult. Excuse me. It's so difficult to get behind the chains with these guys. the Saints can really play defense and come after you. And I do know that you've got to stay on schedule, and then you've got to mitigate all the offensive firepower that the Saints bring. And that starts with being able to shut off the run, and then being able to do the things necessary to quiet down Drew Brees. And I'll tell you, I do not envy Keith Butler this week. This is a very tough draw here.
Awesome.
And you best not be trading Brees for sevens, okay? You know what I mean? If you're Ben, you better not be trading threes for sevens. You better be able to put some red zone points in there.
Yeah, well, you guys have some great wide receivers with Juju and Antonio Brown. They're going to put a lot of pressure on the Saints' defensive backfield. Who else should the Saints be mindful of in the receiving area?
Well, I think it'll be interesting because right now Vance McDonald is really, if you go back to the Tampa game when he went 75 after a stiff arm, I mean, who didn't see that bionic right arm? It was like Lee Majors and $6 Million Man. He just put the dude in the turf and went 75. You're like going, wow. Vance is really a stellar tight end. He harkens back to the days of yore. They likened him to Mike Ditka back in the day because he could equally block and he was rough, physical, and you see it in his play. Also, I'd say James Washington is coming on, Eli Rogers, and then, of course, anybody out of the backfield.
Yeah, the Steelers are going to bring a lot of offensive firepower to the Superdome, like you just said. Rudy brought up some great points about Eli Rogers earlier. He could really be the X factor against this Saints defense, who has struggled with receivers out of the slot quite a bit. Be honest, when I watched these two teams, Pittsburgh and New Orleans, in the preseason, watching the way both of their pass defenses played, I remember saying to my fiance, I'm like, this game could be 45-42. But the way both teams have played recently, especially towards the red zone, I could see this game being played somewhere in the 20s. With both teams having a realistic shot at the end. Craig, is this Steelers secondary good enough to make a playoff push? We know what they can bring in the front seven, particularly with pressuring the passer. But if they fortified themselves on the back end good enough to be a championship contender?
It's a working process. Sean Davis has grown into the free safety. He's had some growing pains at times, but he also has some stellar playing. He's making a move there. Terrell Edmonds, Morgan Burnett, who's been unavailable in some of the quarters and dime and nickel defensive things that they wanted to put him in, playing that, the dime linebacker. He's been unavailable. Now he's coming back. He's getting some playing time. So, again, this is a process for these guys all being able to come together and start to get better. When you don't play together, you're not going to get better. No matter how veteran you are and no matter the ability that you have to be able to, rely on your veteranship, it's not going to happen if you don't play but once every 8 weeks, So there's issues there and problems going on that you think about as this defense comes together. And I think they're just having that opportunity to grow. Joe Hayden leading the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Hayden's had a terrific season, really, 2 terrific years because he had a nice season last year. Are there any other injuries? We know about James Conner, but did Pittsburgh come out of the New England game relatively healthy, or are there any injuries to be concerned about?
I couldn't tell you because I missed Mike Tomlin's update today because I was at Sam Nover's memorial. So I have not heard of any. I was not aware of any injuries after the game, but sometimes on Tuesday he'll say so-and-so needs a little rest until the rest of the week. So we'll see.
Okay. You've given our fans some great stuff. I hope we can have you on again sometime. Hopefully you had some fun with us.
Love to do it. That was fun. It was good to be with Rudy. Good to be with you fellas.
Yeah, definitely. I want to have Rudy back on too. He's become a pretty good friend of mine, over the last year or two. Tell our fans how you can find your show, yours and Touch's show, especially if they're not in the Pittsburgh area.
I'm not really good at that sort of thing. It's in the locker room with Tunch and Wolf, and it's on ESPN 970 AM here. I think you can get it through Steelers Nation Radio. I'm pretty sure. How you go about doing that, I couldn't tell you because and as far as that stuff goes, I'm as dumb as a rock. So you just have to kind of find out yourself. Boy, that sounds bad.
No, I get it. I get it. I'm crying to Kyle every single week about my lack of tech knowledge. So I'm probably a step below you guys. But I tell you what, fans of the Bayou Blitz that are listening right now, if you are interested in listening to Craig and Tunch's show, and they really do put on a great show. It is through the ESPN Pittsburgh affiliate. So I'm sure you can find it through the ESPN app too. But if you're interested in football at all, or especially if you're Steeler fans, find them because they put on one hell of a show.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. So good to be on with you.
Hey, thank you. Have a good game on Sunday. So sorry, what's going to happen? I'm hoping that the Steelers win because you know what? It's like I always say, they're going to the playoffs, and I always tell the boys, I go, hey, don't be messing with my playoff money. And they look at me incredulously, and they go, your playoff money? I go, yeah. Let's go, baby. Let's go. I hear you.
Yeah.
Well, good luck to you guys.
It's gonna be an entertaining game with any luck, because most of my family and friends are Steelers fans too. With any luck, we'll get to all meet up again in Atlanta about a month and a half from now.
There you go.
Beautiful. That would be fun, wouldn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
All right, fellas.
Have a good evening.
Thank you so very much.
Take care.
Oh, we thank you. Have a great holiday, Craig.
You too. Merry Christmas to everybody.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. That was some good stuff.
Yeah, from both Craig, and that was Craig Wolfley, ladies and gentlemen, if you're tuning in late, former great Steelers offensive lineman, terrific color analyst, and terrific guy. Earlier on, we had Rudy Reyes from the Rude Dog Show. That's a national broadcast, so look that up online too. And he's also an anchor through the CBS Cheyenne, Wyoming affiliate, and has covered the Steelers and been a big fan for years. So we want to thank Craig Wolfley and Rudy Reyes for joining us tonight. They gave us some great stuff. I hope we can have them on again soon. Both terrific gentlemen.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let me ask you this, Bob. Let's kind of go a different route before wrapping up the show. I look at the AFC, and you look at the Steelers, and they've been struggling to maintain their position in the playoff race. This is a highly important game for those guys to be able to win, as well as win that final game for them. Do you believe when you look at the Steelers, you look at the Los Angeles Chargers with that big win they had, but they're still behind the Chiefs, right? And you look at the Ravens, they're making a push as well. How do you see this AFC kind of shaking out?
Oh, gosh. I mean, right now, I think you could almost put 4 or 5 names into a hat and pull it out. I think it's literally that close, and it depends on matchups and sites. You're right. Pittsburgh has the lead in the AFC North right now. But creeping right on their tails are the Baltimore Ravens. And they're only a half game behind. Now, Baltimore has a tough matchup against the Chargers this weekend. I believe it's at Los Angeles.
Yeah.
But if the Ravens win and the Steelers lose to the Saints, then the Ravens take over that lead in the AFC North, and all of a sudden, Pittsburgh needs to win that last game, and I think might even need some help to get into the playoffs. So this is a very big game for them. Kansas City and the Chargers are tied for the AFC West lead right now, but the Chiefs have the tiebreaker. So as the old saying goes, if the season would end today, the Chiefs would actually go in as the number 1 seed, and the Chargers would go in as the 5th seed in the AFC. A wild card matchup that I promise you no team wants to take on. And quietly, now they just lost the game 2 weeks ago, but they put on a little roll themselves. and a certain writer actually predicted them to come out of the AFC as the Super Bowl representative. But the Houston Texans are in control of that AFC South, and the Texans. We've talked about them before, Kyle, and you and I have both shown a little bit of concern with their offensive play calling, but they have so much talent on both sides of the ball. I don't personally understand why we talk about the national media overlooking the Saints on the NFC side. I think almost as much, the national media seems to overlook the Houston Texans on the AFC side. Pittsburgh has all that offensive talent, especially at receiver. Kansas City has been putting up the numbers. The Chargers have Phillip Rivers. The Patriots are the Patriots. But I think Houston has beaten all of them.
No. They've beaten.
Okay.
The Texans beat the Patriots, last season? Not this season, right? Here's the problem with the Texans. And I will always say this and go down saying this is Bill O'Brien. Okay. Now, this year he has not been as predictable as he has been in the past, but he still has some clock management issues that he's dealing with. He still has a young quarterback that at times when the game is down to the wire, he's not fully trusting in his abilities. What has helped Houston is that defense. Clowney, Watt, those guys have really done a fabulous job. And look, McKinney and Merciless, I love that name, at linebacker.
Yeah.
Those guys have been doing a good job. But what's been more surprising is the play of their secondary. With the addition of Tyrann Mathieu, where you still have Joseph and Kareem Jackson. Now he's more, sometimes he plays safety, sometimes he plays nickel. So that's been the biggest surprise for them. Kind of like the Saints. Now you see our defense is really helping the team to win. But that's what a team is about. Not all the time will the offense be at the pinnacle, right? And not all the time the defense will be up there. So how will the teams respond? Oh, that's that word again, respond. And you see these teams doing a great job responding. The concern with the Chiefs is that at times they're not responding in the big games. The loss against the Rams, the Chargers, and the Patriots. 3 playoff teams right there, guys, that the Chiefs are not responding to the big-time teams. And I heard Ed McCaffrey this morning. I'm sorry, I got to grind this axe here. Ed McCaffrey was on with Bob Papa this morning, right? And Bob Papa said, well, Ed, who's your, after that performance of Brees, whatever, who's your MVP candidate? And he went on to justify why Mahomes is, because Mahomes has the big plays ability. He's been able to be consistent the whole year round and everything else. And I was just thinking, hasn't Brees done that? And who has a better record right now, right? And whose team is he's lifting everybody around him when he only has like one wide receiver. He's got to go with everybody else at times. And I'm just thinking, and I started, and it didn't dawn on me until I went to Twitter and I saw the saltiness of not only Cam Newton, but if you notice, a little sweet McCaffrey was kind of salty after that game last night. So I'm thinking that was Daddy kind of like not wanting to give Drew Brees his props because his little boy got beaten last night. And I said, and if anybody want to say anything,
I loved Ed McCaffrey as a player, but Yeah, I heard a little bit about that too, and I kind of grimaced and said to myself, "Oh no, Ed, not you too."
Yeah, man. And so, because when I was driving in, I was just listening to. I was like, really? And it was like about face from where he was last week in his MVP prediction. But anyway, guys, my thought, and I will always go down with this. Kurt Warner has been the last MVP to win it and win the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I don't know if jinx is the right word to say. I prefer Drew Brees, to focus on Drew Brees and this team and to get us into the Super Bowl, to win the Super Bowl. That's more important, in my opinion, than these guys giving him that honor. And I still believe that honor should go to the best player after the Super Bowl. After the Super Bowl, not in that NFL honors thing right before the Super Bowl that they have. You know, I think that should go after the Super Bowl. Always thought that way. But anyway, man, Bob, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I apologize. No, I mean, we were talking about, and I guarantee you're right, Drew Brees is not focused, sitting in that locker room saying, oh, my God, I can't believe that I might not get the league MVP. He is focused on winning games, taking this team to the Super Bowl, and bringing another Lombardi trophy back to the city of New Orleans. That's where his focus is on. And I know you and I are going to talk about this a lot in the next few weeks. Once the playoff matchups are settled and everything like that. But look at this. I look at, and there is a lot of young quarterback talent throughout the league. But there are some things that haven't changed over the years. And if Craig Wolfley or Rudy was still on with us, I'm sure that they would agree with us. Young quarterbacks very rarely do well in their very first playoff appearances. We saw it. Jared Goff got eliminated in the first round last year. Russell Wilson of Seattle took a couple tries before he was seasoned enough to get to the Super Bowl. And we could go on and on and on. You look at the NFC, Kirk Cousins, I'm not even sure he has started a playoff game, but if he has, he hasn't won one. Dak Prescott has not won a playoff game. Mitch Trubisky of Chicago has not appeared in the playoffs. And you go over into the AFC, Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes, 0 playoff experience. Phillip Rivers, 0 playoff success.
Lamar Jackson.
So that brings us
Lamar Jackson.
What's that?
Lamar Jackson.
Yeah. Lamar Jackson, 0 playoff appearances. So that brings us back to the old War Dogs. Drew Brees, Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger. Those are the names right at the top of the list. Hall of Famers for sure. Legends, really. Players with Super Bowl rings, players with sustained numerous playoff successes. Now, obviously, the teams around them have a lot to do with that. But at the end of the day, you see seasoned playoff veteran quarterbacks having success, almost without exception. So I think as we make a run into the playoffs here over the next couple of weeks, and the Saints' spot is clinched, they are just trying, as you alluded to earlier, they only need one win in their last 2 games, or the Rams to lose once. And no matter what else happens, the Saints have the number 1 seed. And teams coming into that Superdome, it's going to be a very difficult time coming out of there with a win, because the Saints' passing attack is so much different at home than it is on the road. Drew and these other veterans, and certainly Sean Payton, they know what it takes to sustain playoff success, and that's really what they're building up for.
Look, the Saints got to win, and let's take care of business. That's the one thing I wanted to see from this team with those 3 road games. How will they fare? You came away 2 out of 3, right? So how can you take care of business? And taking care of business, going in at home, winning one of these 2 games. Now, the preference is, of course, to beat the Steelers, because that also gives you a really measured opponent that you're going to possibly face or could face in February if you're able to get there, right? Mm-hmm. Then if you win, you don't have to worry about the Bears nor the Rams, right? You got the number 1 seed locked up with that one win this week. So then you can give yourself at least a 2-week bye. Not in which you say, Kyle, they got one more game to play against Carolina. No, they get to rest some of these guys that are banged up and injured. Today, the Saints had to bring in some offensive linemen off the street to kind of try them out because, look, there's some concerns with Walford guys, and there's some concerns going on in the interior of the Saints line. So that, to me, is more of a concern. What's going to happen with our offensive line right now?
Yeah, it is a concern, and we mentioned it a little bit with Teron Armstead and how they had to juggle that left side earlier this evening. And I think Saints fans, that's the matchup. There are 2 matchups that I'm going to be paying very close attention to because the Pittsburgh Steelers are a good football team. This has the setup to be one of the, as ESPN would call it, one of those instant classics. It could be a right down to the wire, gripping white knuckle affair. But 2 matchups that I'm going to have my eye on. The Pittsburgh Steelers do an outstanding job of rushing the passer. Craig and Rudy said it earlier tonight. TJ Watt leads the team with 11 sacks, but I think they have 41 or 42 sacks as a team. That's only a couple behind the New Orleans Saints total. So with the struggles that the Saints have had on the offensive line, we don't know if Unger is going to be out of concussion protocol. We don't know if Armstead is going to be back on the field, and if so, is he 100%? So can they protect Drew Brees? Can they open up holes for Ingram and Kamara in the running attack? Because if they can, they need to run the ball to keep those pass rushers off balance. We know that. And if they can sustain some rushing success, that will buy time for Brees. And really, Michael Thomas should have a field day through the Steelers secondary, I think. And Pittsburgh has done a poor job against running backs out of the backfield. So Kamara could have a big game as well. What do you think are the matchups on that side of the ball?
As far as the Saints, look, Bud Dupree, you got to think about him as well, right? Watt is always going to have a high motor. It's just something about that family. You're going to have Watt bringing constant pressure, just like Kuechly was bringing pressure. Other than Kuechly is in the middle, Watt's on the end. The thing about that defense, they're inconsistent, just like that offense is inconsistent. They have the big play potential on the defense, but they also have some mental lapses that I've seen this season with these guys. So where the Steelers usually get into trouble is when they try to play man-to-man with a guy like Alvin Kamara, right? I think their linebacking core is solid, but I don't think they have the speed like we saw last night from Kuechly and Davis and those guys, If our tight ends are able to be effective in this game, that's going to put pressure on those guys. And we need to see Watson, Hill, and please, Dan Arnold, hold on to a ball. The kid has shown flashes, right? But I just need to have him. You know what's wrong with these young guys? Is like I said earlier, they don't go to snatch the ball and attack the ball because give it here, that's mine. It's like I'm just waiting for it to come into my arm, my hand or to my bread basket. You've got to get that ball, man. You've got to be able to. This is the game is on the line type of deal. Every time a ball is thrown your way, and that's how you've got to fight, because every one of these teams are trying to prove a point. This season is wrapping up, and when you get into the playoffs, you one and done. So every game is highly important, and they've got to play like that as well. So that's what I'm looking at, man. And our wide receiving core, I think we're going to do pretty decent against their defensive backfield. That backfield has been known to give up some big plays from time to time. They did play Gronkowski pretty well, bracketing him. So who's the next guy going to really step up, man? Is it going to be Kirkwood? And, Saints did a surprising thing. They had Brandon Marshall on the team for, 4 weeks? Mm-hmm. Let him go. And when they need a guy to sign off the street, they sign Simi Cobb. Who?
Right.
I'm like, what? Huh? What? I mean, did that mean that Brandon Marshall was just a scrub all this time? And y'all just I didn't get that one. Tell me if I'm wrong on that. Or if Brandon Marshall probably say, nah, I'm not going to re-sign with you guys. I ain't going back and forth like that. We just don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they had him available to them for 4 or 5 weeks. Yeah, and didn't give him a hat one time. So that tells you that something was up. Now, we can only speculate. Did he didn't pick up the playbook? Was it that he was injured and just didn't heal upright properly? Or is it that he just can't? He doesn't have it anymore. I mean, he is a veteran. We can only speculate whether it's any one or a combination of all three. But obviously, they didn't feel comfortable. I mean, heck, they activated Tommy Lee Lewis off of injured reserve instead of activating Brandon Marshall. That tells me all I need to know about where Brandon was, because Tommy Lee Lewis is clearly not the answer to the receiving woes, to the receiving production beyond Michael Thomas. I agree with you. I think the answer has got to come from Kirkwood or Traquan, or a combination of the both. We're not asking them to put up 150 yards per game like AB and Smith-Schuster combined for in Pittsburgh. We're just asking them to be a consistent complementary weapon for Drew, because these teams are bracketing Michael Thomas and they're clogging up those intermediate routes, and he's having a harder time getting open. I mean, he's still one of the best receivers in the NFL. I think he caught six passes last night. But his yardage after the catch was limited because there are just so many defenders around him. They need somebody else to step up, stretch the field, or at least gear some of the defensive pressure off of Thomas or Kamara coming out of the backfield.
Yeah, well, last night he was targeted 9 times, had 7 catches for 49 yards. His longest was only 12 yards, and that came when he literally fought for that extra yardage, right? So that's not good for your wide receiver to have only your number one wide receiver to only have his longest catch 12 yards. Kirkwood had that 21-yarder. That was and Watson the 28-yarder. That was it, man. That was the longest of the day for the New Orleans Saints. But again, let's kind of revigorate what needs to be revigorated. And I'm just going to, and maybe I'm wrong, Bob, and you have a better job dissecting these guys than myself. If Luke Kuechly knew what plays was coming, are we back to where Sean Payton is being predictable? Your thoughts?
I think it's a good question. I do. But my answer to that is going to be not necessarily. And I say that because, Kuechly is an extremely intelligent player. I mean, he is not only one heck of an athlete from the linebacker position, but he's also a football guru. He studies film. He studies his opponents. And he has played, I think Luke has been in the league, 6 years? So this is the 12th or 13th time he has played the New Orleans Saints. You get to know your divisional rivals. You and I have had enough former players on here to know how they feel. I mean, we always pick their brains, so we know how they feel about their divisional rivals. They study them all through the off season as well. So he knows this Saints offense as well as anyone can. So I do think that that's part of it. And another part is Sean has always called a more conservative offensive game plan on the road.
Always.
Yeah. Yes. And that's without exception. In the last 2 years, they've had success that way. I mean, they bullied opponents on the road, especially this year. And they did run for 155 yards last night. But the danger is that he does call a conservative game plan passing the ball. They go downfield a lot less when they're on the road than they do at home. And sometimes the weather plays a factor in that. I couldn't see the weather playing a factor last night, but they undoubtedly they did not go on down the field. They only even attempted a couple shots, like you said. So we really have to keep an eye on how this Saints offense comes out of the gate against Pittsburgh this Sunday. I mean, they're back at home. We don't know. We don't think anything is wrong with Drew Brees. We've talked about the complementary targets not stepping up. We're hoping to get Armstead back healthy. We know what Kamara, Thomas, and Ingram can do, et cetera, et cetera. Now they just have to go out and do it. To come out of 3 straight road games like this and to do so with a 2-1 record, regardless of how you did it. I think, and you were leaning on the positive early on in the show, and that's where I'm going to go back to. The Saints offense looked ugly in the last 3 games, almost without exception. But they still won both of them, and they proved that once again that they could win a game in any style of football. You want to get into a slugfest, that's fine. They'll throw punch after punch with you, drag you through the mud, and still come out with a 12-9 victory. It was a white-knuckle affair. It wasn't pretty, but it got the job done, and it got them to 12-2. Can they win a playoff game playing that way, or even a game against a playoff contender like the Pittsburgh Steelers? I highly doubt it. But they might have to because Pittsburgh had their own slugfest last week against New England. There's not too many that would have steal the Patriots. That would have surprised enough people. But then when you would have told them, and the score's going to lead.
Hey, Bob.
It has to be a low-scoring defensive slugfest.
Yeah. Well, look, Bob, and how do I say this? Coach used to always put this in perspective, Coach Rick Gilly. You've got to remember you're getting to where things are a lot tenser, if that's a word, tenser in the playoffs, right? So if things are tense and really close, because coaches are going to be a little bit more conservative, right? Because making big mistakes can come back to haunt you because you don't have next week to play. This is what you're seeing. You're not going to have these. I'm very rarely after that first week in the playoffs are you going to see 40, 50 points put up, right? You see those closer 20s to teens type of games, right? And I was proud at the fact that the team was still able to really control the clock, still was able to push the ball down the field, get into the red zone those times, right? And have the opportunity to put more points on the board. Tommy Lee, fluke play, learns from that. I bet you it will never, ever happen again. Okay. So those are the things. I think some of the mistakes that we have seen from those wide receivers as well as from and Kamara didn't look the same as well. That's something we need to kind of touch on. He at times, when he had that one-on-one with Reed, that was for sure last season he would have scored, right? Maybe he's a little banged up right now, but, Mark Ingram is going to have to be the key down the stretch for the Saints.
Yeah.
And you saw last night Mark was angry with the play call that they called for when he only picked up like a yard or two. I think Mark Ingram is going to have to be our bell cow, helping us down the stretch, because the Saints need to be more effective running that football. And Sean Payton too early got away from the run game and went to let me throw. And what helped bring the team back, just like what helped brought the team back in Tampa Bay, was the run game. They've got to stay patient, and he has to stay patient. I'm concerned. What's going to happen if Wolford is not going to be able to play? Can Clapp come in and help to fill in this next week? That's going to be key for the Saints, man.
Yeah, it will. The offensive line battles on both sides of the ball are going to be key. Which makes you laugh because we point to that every single week, and there's so much offensive firepower on both sides of the ball. Brees, Roethlisberger, Brown, Smith, Schuster, Thomas, Kamara, Ingram, James Conner, if he plays, Vance McDonald has had a terrific season. Yet it all is going to come down to run blocking, opening up the holes, and keeping your quarterback upright and unhurried. The Steelers' offensive line is one of the better ones in the league. There's no question about that. In my opinion, the Saints are every bit as good, if not better, from an all-around aspect. Personally, I think they pass block as good as anybody in the league, despite their struggles the last few weeks. But you're right. Warford being dinged up. Unger left the game with a concussion. I haven't heard anything, as far as Kincaid. It's too early in the week to tell whether he's going to be a go or not. And they need Armstead back on that field. We're starting to see injuries take a toll a little bit. And just like we saw with the Saints defensive line last year, taking a toll down the stretch, and it really affected them in the playoffs. I really hope that's not the case with the offensive line, because I think that this is a championship football team on every level, but they have to have their horses, and we talked about it early in the season. One of the concerns we had for this team coming into the season was the depth.
Again, that's why this game is critical. If the Saints are able to win this game, I feel a whole lot better. It's going to be a challenging game. Look, that offensive line of the Steelers is no joke, especially that left side. And those guys have huge horses. That's why they were able to open up a lot of lanes for Samuels. I mean, it doesn't matter. Bell's missing, no problem. Connor, what's he been doing all season? No problem. He's a little banged up. Young rookie comes in, Samuels, no problem. What do you have? $140? So, I mean, and they opened up some serious lanes, and the Patriots had no answer. Now, we have a very good run defense, the best in the league.
Yeah.
So I feel a little bit better about our chances there. I'm just concerned what's going to happen, how we're going to protect Brees. If we can't protect Brees, that's why I think we should go to the run game, test those guys, bang it on them, kind of soften them up as well. And I think that'll open up some lanes down the field for these young wide receivers in the black and gold. Okay?
Yeah.
All right, buddy. Well,
it will.
Go ahead.
The only thing I was going to end with was, it's and the vulnerability that each defense has is in their secondary. Even as lights out as the Saints secondary has been playing in recent weeks, they're going to be tested this week. But the running attack is going to be key for both teams. Can the Steelers pick up some yardage on the ground? And the Saints have held a who's who list of running backs under 70 yards, let alone 100 yards each time they face them. Can the Steelers control the two-headed monster of Ingram and Kamara? There's so many questions to answer. This might be one of the most entertaining games of the year, and obviously a civil war in my family. But I'm hoping that my Saints will make me look pretty by the end of the day.
Yeah. Look, who have they lost to? I don't recall. I know they lost to the Ravens earlier this season. Was it?
The Steelers. Yeah, the Steelers have lost to the Ravens. They tied the Browns. They lost to the Chiefs. Then they lost to the Raiders, Jaguars, they beat the Jaguars in the final seconds. They lost to the Raiders and the Denver Broncos, both on the road.
So if you look at the teams they lost to and the teams that played them close, all of those teams had good running games.
Yes.
Okay, so there you go. That's the key. Can Sean Payton be patient enough to stick with the run? That's what we really need to kind of figure out from there. Can he stay patient? Okay, that's my thoughts.
No, you're exactly right. And like you said, I agree. I'll feel a whole lot better once that number one seed is sewn up. Hopefully this weekend, rest some of those injured starters, and enjoy even a 2-week bye for some of them.
Yeah.
But have the NFC playoff race come through New Orleans. That's all you can ask for. That's all you can want from your regular season, and they're set up to do exactly that. So we'll see what happens on Sunday.
Yeah, definitely. Look, I know Teron Armstead. He's been trying to get healthy, and hopefully, I know he practiced some last week, but he wasn't 100%. That's why they still kept him out of the game. I was kind of wondering, Bob, if you look at Manti Te'o, he's been a healthy scratch most of the season. Early on in the season, he played very well. Do you think we may get a chance to see him in case these guys are able to, need some extra firepower at the linebacking corps?
It's possible. I don't think anybody could criticize the way Demario Davis, Alex Anzalone, and A.J. Klein have played at the position. But it wouldn't be a bad idea to bring Te'o up for some depth. It gives them some different looks defensively, because the Steelers are going to run a lot of different fronts at them. That's one thing that they do. They'll spread you out. And then run the ball with Samuels or Connors if he's healthy. Or they'll bunch it together and throw the ball. So the Saints defense is going to be tested, maybe more so than by any other offense that they face this year. They've played extremely well in recent weeks, the New Orleans defense has. I see no reason to believe that won't continue. The Steelers are going to put up yards. You can't stop them from doing that. They're too talented. The thing I'm looking at on the defensive side of the ball is, can New Orleans get turnovers? Ben Roethlisberger has thrown some balls up for grabs this year. I believe if he doesn't lead the NFL in interceptions, he's close to it. So he's gonna throw some 50-50 balls up. Can Eli Apple, Marcus Williams, Marshawn Lattimore, and even Von Bell, who had a spectacular game last night, can they make some plays in the secondary? If that's the case, it's okay to give up some yardage to Smith-Schuster and Antonio Brown. Everybody does it. But when you have an opportunity to make plays and give your offense a short field, especially in the Superdome where we know Sean Payton goes for the jugular, they have to convert those opportunities.
Look, man, Marcus Williams has been missing in action. I don't know if he's been on any key plays over the past several weeks other than that hit he put on the guy in Tampa Bay. That's not a concern at this time, but it will be when you face a guy like Antonio Brown and the speedster in Juju Schuster-Smith. So, if those safeties have to play stellar this game. And I don't know if we have enough firepower to release Von Bell from any of those guys to kind of do those safety blitzes. So we'll see, man, because the Steelers, just like the Saints, they like to throw the ball. And, they have the horses as well. So, and they're going to be on a dry track. So let's see how things go. And I have faith in our defense, and I believe in what they're been able to do. The second half adjustments, of course, is going to be critical for the Saints. They've been doing a good job at that over the past year. So ever since last season. So I just would like to see how we start the game off offensively, and I'm not looking for the passing. I'm looking for the running. Okay. All right, Bob, tell the people how they can find you on social media as well as on the web.
Well, I can be found on Facebook, personally, Bob Rose. And if you aren't already a member of our Bayou Blitz Facebook group, then shame on you. Seek Mr. Mosley or myself out. If you aren't a member, send us a member request. We'd love to have you as part of the family. We're approaching 1,500 members of the Bayou Blitz group now. So congratulations to all of you, and thank you so much for your support. One of many terrific Saints discussion groups throughout Facebook. So get yourself out there and involved. There's a lot of good information to be had out there. I can also be found on Twitter, personally at BobbyR2613. And, of course, my articles are through the Canal Street Chronicles, available on Facebook or on Twitter at SaintsCST. A lot of great writers over there. We work very closely with you guys at the Saints News Network. We basically are intertwined. So, folks, get yourself involved. We want your word. We want your opinion. We want your input. We want you as a member of our family.
Yeah, definitely. And don't forget, you can be able to listen to everything we are talking about tonight, as well as our friends at Under the Dome and the other guys out there on the internet at www.saintspodcast.com. And you can follow Barry Hursters and his articles on www.saintsnewsnetwork.com. And you can be able to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Saints News, the original Saints News for the Houdat Nation. This is Kyle T. Mosley of the Saints News Network with Mr. Bob Rose of the Bayou Blitz and the Canal Street Chronicles. Bob, you and your family have a safe, happy, and Merry Christmas to you and your family. You guys be safe up there. Bob and I will return on Saturday, the 29th at 7 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time, 8 o'clock p.m. to be able to give you guys a preview and recap of the Saints Steelers game, but the preview of the final game of the season against Carolina in the Mercedes-Benz Superdome. This is Kyle T. Mosley with Mr. Bob Rose. Bob, Tell the family, Master Will and Lauren, I say hello and Merry Christmas.
Will do, and Merry Christmas to you, Kyle, and to all of your family and all members of Who Dat Nation and everybody listening to us. We hope you have a terrific and very safe holiday.
Merry Christmas, guys. Who Dat, baby. Take care. Bye-bye.